We are looking, I'm going to be clear, very clear so that people understand. I believe in reform and I believe in people have, addictions issues. They have all of these things that are a problem with crime. That's not who we're talking about here. We're talking about prolific repeat offenders that just keep being in front of our judicial system, our RCMP, our city police, people have to keep dealing with over and over and over again, and they're causing harm to our communities. And so we're looking for change in that. Those people need to be behind bars because they're not being reformed, they're not making change, and instead they're making life difficult for the rest of us.
Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Today we turn our attention to an issue that's resonating in communities across Canada: bail reform. Municipalities are stepping up and making their voices heard and demanding change. In Manitoba, the calls for reform have reached a breaking point when a tragic death of a 28-year-old Kellie Verwey in Portage la Prairie ignited a movement. Verwey, a dedicated city tourism coordinator, was killed in a collision police say was caused by a man who should have never been out on the streets. A repeat offender out on bail with multiple violations and an active warrant for his arrest. Now, the frustration and anger in Portage la Prairie spilled over when Mayor Sharilyn Knox took a stand, penning a critical open letter to Manitoba's Justice Minister Matt Wiebe. Her message was clear: the justice system is failing the public, and it's time for leaders to take bold action. Since then, Manitoba municipalities across the province have rallied behind the mayor, echoing her call for reform on bail. Brandon Mayor Jeff Fawcett has also voiced his concerns, saying that while bail reform has been long an issue for his city council, the latest tragedy in Portage la Prairie was the tipping point. The voices of Manitoba's municipal leaders are growing louder, unified in their demand for change, not just in the province, but also federally. So, what does need to change? What specific reforms are mayors like Mayor Knox and Mayor Fawcett calling for? And what will the province do when they answer this important call? We sit down today with Mayor Sharilyn Knox of Portage la Prairie and Mayor Jeff Fawcett of Brandon to discuss the challenges, the demands, and what real action on bail reform could look like. This is Municipal Affairs. Did you know that Manitoba's municipalities have a voice working tirelessly for them every day? That's the Association of Manitoba Municipalities, your trusted partner in advocacy and action. From local roads to economic development, emergency services to community planning, the AMM ensures municipal priorities are heard loud and clear. They work side by side with local leaders and municipalities, empowering them to tackle the challenges that matter most to their communities. At the AMM, they bring municipalities together, united on the key issues and stronger as a team. Together, they work to make sure your community's concerns don't just get heard, they get action. So whether it's building infrastructure, strengthening local economies, or shaping provincial and federal policy, the AMM is here to make municipal issues matter. The Association of Manitoba Municipalities, advocating for your community, making a difference for all Manitobans. Learn more about how AMM is helping your community at amm.mb.ca. Mayor Knox, Mayor Fawcett, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about the municipalities' call for bail reform at a provincial and even federal level, more federal than provincial, but an all hands on deck approach to reforming our bail system. Before we get into the tough questions, Mayor Knox, if you can, this call started back in January after the unfortunate passing of Kellie Verwey. Who was Kellie Verwey in Portage la Prairie, and how did she affect your community?
Kellie was a part of our city team. She was our tourism coordinator, but more than that, Kellie was an integral part of our community. She was just one of those bright lights, one of those go-getters. She saw our community as a whole. She had, the best of relationships. She was a person who would do anything and wanted to see things happen. She was very incredibly close to her family. If you read any of the stories, you would hear things like Kellie was just about to get married, right, and start a new part of her life with that. And so, a lot of people lost somebody very important to them that day.
Your open letter, Mayor Knox, ignited a strong response not only in Portage la Prairie, but in Manitoba, and I would even say across Canada. Traditionally, municipalities don't advocate on more federal issues, but you did, and it has ignited a strong reaction from across Canada. Like I said, why was it important to write that letter to Justice Minister Matt Wiebe and the federal government?
I think this incident and losing Kellie was it's not a new story across our country. It just really it personally affected me, and prolific offenders and bail reform has been something that we've been dealing with for a long time. But when it hit us so personally, like, if I could tell you just what happened, like that, the day, the emotions that it went through, from the phone call that I received very early on that this has happened before anybody else knows, and you're dealing with that in the role that I am, and then an hour or so later, hearing that this is caused by somebody who should be behind bars, and the fact that I know I'm going to have to be leading a community and talking to families, and how do you explain that away? How do you make excuses for that? Because there are none. All it does is just puts light on the fact that what's happening in our country isn't working and we need change. And so that's what triggered the letter. I needed a way to get my feelings out and know that I was doing something to honor Kellie and to honor her family. And what better way than to work to make change? And that's what we're doing here.
What exactly are you looking for in that change that you're talking about?
We are looking, I'm going to be clear, very clear, so that people understand. I believe in reform, and I believe in people have, addictions issues. They have all of these things that are a problem with crime. That's not who we're talking about here. We're talking about prolific repeat offenders that just keep being in front of our judicial system, our RCMP, our city police. People have to keep dealing with over and over and over again, and they're causing harm to our communities. And so we're looking for change in that. Those people need to be behind bars because they're not being reformed. They're not making change. And instead, they're making life difficult for the rest of us.
Mayor Fawcett, you said in a recent article in the Brandon Sun that Brandon councillors have been long voicing concerns about bail reform. Your council has come out and supported Mayor Knox in her call in bail reform. How has the discussion changed around bail reform since that letter that Mayor Knox put out, and why was it important for Brandon to show solidarity with the people of Portage la Prairie?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And it was something that we've been looking at for quite some time. We have a provincial courthouse here. We often see people come to court when they get there, if they do, and then just be released from there. And they stay quite often, may not even be up from here. And so we were actually working on this, we had a particular counselor that was digging into it in the last little while. But yeah, even with our previous chief of police, we did a lot of work. It was always top of their mind because they spend so much time with, and I have some incidents I can give even from this year, with the same people. And just shortly after, that tragic incident in Portage, and unfortunately, Sharilyn can tell you of a couple since then, like just, same kind of thing out there. Like we had an attack in our downtown by someone that was released from Winnipeg the day before, got himself into Brandon, has family around here and attacked someone with a bat. Like it was within 24 hours. Violent offender. But we also all agree, and maybe this is the Manitoba way, but we know that there is things that can be done, like for other people. Like there is mental health issues, there is addiction issues. We do need to deal with those things. Those people don't always necessarily need to be in jail, but they need to be cared for somewhere and be, but it's these, extensive histories of repeat offenses that are violent. Like we have so much of that.
Yeah, can I just jump in here for a second? Because you bring up a good point that I wasn't going to talk about, but you brought it up, so I got to play in the sandbox for a second, if you don't mind. Portage la Prairie, Brandon, two major hubs in the province of Manitoba. You have a large rural communities that surround you, and you have a lot of you have provincial courthouses, I'm assuming, in both of your communities. So that means, and I say accused offenders, and I gotta say that because I just want to make sure I don't get sued, come to your communities, and then that bail system does fail your community. And when they get brought into your community, they get released into your community. Is this issue being exacerbated in your communities because you guys are hubs of your respective parts of the provinces, Mayor Fawcett?
Yeah, and I think that's with Mayor Knox being the chair of our city's caucuses, like that is one of the reasons we're sort of bringing this, and we'll bring something more forward at city caucus, sort of under her leadership on that, because ultimately it's in the cities that the courthouses are, and also the jails. But in this case, the courthouses, that people are released, and they're released, and we have document of people getting released and going back out and committing crime within 24 hours in a city that may not be their home. But we know that, like, we accept that. We just need our other levels of government to work with us. You're not going to put a courthouse in every community.
Mayor Knox, do you have anything to follow up on that? Because you are, as I said, Portage la Prairie is a hub of central Manitoba, and I can imagine that you have people who don't live in Portage la Prairie who come to Portage la Prairie for criminal related matters, as in courthouse, jail systems. Do you think that that is an issue that's being exacerbated because of being a hub and being a city?
Oh, absolutely. We've looked at our numbers. We've looked at who's committing crimes in our community, and it's about half, right, that aren't from our community, which is important. But it's also important to say, like, we have a position because we are the cities, and we are, a place where there are smaller communities come. But I'll tell you, the number of small municipalities that I've heard from on this issue, it's an issue for them too, right? I think they know that even though it may be Portage la Prairie, might be Brandon, they know that these crimes can come to their communities too. So this is an issue that we're really seeing that it's affecting everyone and every community in our province and in our country. So that's, I think, why we can create this strong message and what we're going to do moving forward.
Do you think the message is being heard? Because I know from the newspaper reports that I've read, Justice Minister for the province of Manitoba, Matt Wiebe, has reached out to you or has written back to you. I'm not sure exactly the context of the conversation, but do you feel like the province is listening? And I know that's a political question, but this is a political matter, and it needs to be asked.
No, I'm happy to say that 100% I feel that they're behind us on this call for action to the federal government. The province of Manitoba did just announce their 5-point bail reform back in the fall. So good, really good community consultations to come up with that, in my opinion. And it's too early to tell what kind of real effect that those are going to have, but we know it's got to be the federal level. So yeah, actually our Minister of Justice and our Association of Manitoba Municipalities penned a joint letter to the federal government, both signed. So, I mean, that's a clear message from this province when it's coming from not only our provincial government, but it's coming from 137 municipalities in Manitoba, and both, I know Mayor Fawcett and I have had conversations with our First Nations, our neighbors around us, and same thing. So I think the call for action is going to just continue to grow. So for me, my next step is we're reaching out. I've penned a letter. I'm sending a letter to the justice ministers across this country, as well as the lobbying organizations like SUMA, etc., and hoping that they'll get on board and get involved in this call with us.
I asked a political question to Mayor Knox, so I'm going to have to ask a political question to Mayor Fawcett here. I hate to make light of the situation, but it seems like things are very reactive right now, and the action that the provincial government is doing is only because of the death of a Portage la Prairie resident. Both of your communities have been calling for bail reform, not just in 2025, but in 2024, 2023. Is it safe to say from my perspective that the province is reacting to an issue and not being proactive on this issue? Because you've both been calling for bail reform for some time now.
It's certainly a larger subject because it's not like they weren't doing things. And we do always work well with our all levels of government. That like we're municipal, we better work with the provincial and federal partners, or we'd only have 8 cents. So, but they like, we can't forget they were doing things like, one of the things, and it hasn't been rolled out to the extent that I'd like here, but they do have the electronic bail monitoring so they were doing those things. And I think there's lots of room for that for retail theft people. There's something for that. And I want them to continue on that, but that's sort of what they've been working on, things like that. And I think that this just put the hammer down on saying, hey, you know what? These violent offenders and these multiple repeat offenders, we have to do a better job on that. Like they just the whole system is getting bogged down. And so has it changed their focus or hastened it forward a bit? I would like to think so. I would like to think that they are. Yeah, is it reactionary? A little. I don't think they were working on it, but we put it back to the very front.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to either one of you, if whoever wants to take this question, because it's a multifaceted one, I'd like to hear both of you answer it if you don't mind. The federal government would say that in January 2024, they passed amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada, Bill C-48, which they say, quote, the amendments make targeted changes to the criminal code bail regime to address serious repeat offenders offending with firearms, knives, bear sprays, and other weapons. For both of your communities, does this go far enough?
No.
Really?
It doesn't, in my opinion. I mean, it's a help and it's a start, absolutely. But like for a community our size, I can say that honestly, at times we are spending all of our time and resources on the same 15 to 20 people that they are going in and out of court, in and out of cells, in and out of this. Resources are very tough for us as municipalities, right? So how do we move forward in the sense of crime reduction or prevention when we're spending all of our resources on this? So there definitely has to be stronger bail for violence, those sort of things. But they also have to be looking at the people that are just continually in and out of our system, because there's nothing for them right now except taking up resources and then causing horrific accidents like they have.
Mayor Fawcett, does it go
I'll,
far enough?
I'll say to that yeah, in theory, I think it's good. But in practice, I don't think it's been put out. Like, it just doesn't seem to have made any effect. Like, and we have all the examples, like these same people that in theory that should be dealing with It doesn't seem to be, because a violent offender is back out after their 20th charge on bail, or they're back out on the street to show up at their next hearing, and something happens. So in theory, it's good. We haven't seen it in practice.
While researching this story and trying to come up with some questions, I always do the devil's advocate question on this show, because I want to make sure that I'm giving credence to both sides of the story. And I'm not saying both sides of the story as in the perpetrator and the victim, but there might be some critics who argue that stricter bail conditions could lead to overcrowding in jails and impact the justice system's efficiency within Manitoba, within Canada. How would you respond to those concerns that say, if we do put stricter conditions on, or we put on stricter enforcement, then our justice system could be bogged down, which I would gather we all three of us would agree that it's already bogged down right now. And that's why we're seeing this sort of rotation of people coming in and out, because the justice system just can't handle the amount of people who are getting caught and then need to be put into jail. How would you respond to critics, Mayor Knox?
My response would be the federal justice, or the federal system had when they passed a bill that they wanted less people incarcerated. That was a goal. So if you actually look at the numbers right now, they have met that goal. It may look like right now we have the same number as, say, 10 years ago, right? As we did, but that doesn't talk about our population growth. So they've met those goals. There is less people in jails. And the thing that I think is missing is when they made these changes, say with Bill C-75, or even the youth changes to the Youth Justice Act, is that they looked at two pieces, right? They looked at either reform addictions, they looked at mental health supports, they looked at all of these outside things where people needed to have access to them, right, in order for them to stay out of jail. Well, we know in our country what access means, and it's those things are not happening to the level that they need to be. And then we're not talking about maybe an incarceration level that we have. We need some sort of level in there that people, whether it's mandatory treatment, whether it's just a different level of incarceration, that people can get the help they need. But right now they're just being let out and said, well, I hope next Tuesday you could go for your addictions treatment, right? And it's just not, it's not working for people. There's a piece there that they're not getting what they need. And if they're not getting what they need, then we have to go back to that they're incarcerated.
Mayor Fawcett, you talked about the ankle monitoring that the provincial government has been rolling out, or piloting, I should say, in the province of Manitoba. This would help in the case of Kellie, because the person who is accused, and I say that because I'm not sure what the status of the situation is right now, but he was out on a warrant, and he was out, and people were looking for him. This would have been able to find him and be able to potentially put him in jail if he broke his bail conditions. What does the city of Brandon, what do municipalities want to see from their provincial government to help curb this challenge? And I say challenge in the respectful way, to ensure that we know where these repeat offenders are at all times.
Yeah, and so I do think some of the things like that ankle monitor is definitely worth looking at. Probably not on violent offenders. They need to be maybe looked at differently, but retail theft across the country is a massive problem. And if you've been picked up continually for retail theft and your ankle monitor has you, in Walmart, you can actually speak through those, saying, leave the store, and you can follow up on it. But that's a different piece. The non-violent versus violent and things like that are.
But isn't it the same piece though? Because bail reform is a multifaceted issue. And if you talk about one, you have to talk about the other, because if you're saying, okay, we're only going to ensure that the bail is for the violent criminals, then you're saying, okay, we can be soft on the pickpocketers are the ones that are going into your Walmart. I'm just playing devil's advocate with you again.
Yeah,
Please
yeah,
don't
yeah,
accuse me of
yeah.
being angry at you. I just
No, no,
want to
no,
make
no, no.
sure.
You're right. But and you know, and under the circumstances, I don't think that we can kind of go all in on all of that. And there is different levels of some of those things. But we do have to be clear on violent offenses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the offenses that are random or the potential, you know, like you know, I've got just I'll give you a couple of these. This is just since January, like in this year, just a couple of and our this is provincial, like because a lot of this comes out of our provincial court. You know, we have federal judges that do things here. That's the little less of our issue right around here. This is provincial court that a lot of this comes through. You know, person picked up the other day since 2013. This was their 40th conviction. They've had 21 breaches with multiple assault convictions. So they were out, picked up on, you know, like
Sorry,
this
did
is
you
what they
say
do.
40 times?
Yeah, yeah. There's another one that since then, 10 convictions, 5 breaches, assault, 2 assaults with a weapon, 18 years old
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and out.
Is this
You know,
similar to Portage la Prairie? Like just one because you're nodding, and I just want to make sure. Like, are these
It's
the same stories that are happening in Portage? And
same
if
stories in Portage, same in Winnipeg,
yeah,
everywhere. These
yeah,
are the exact same stories.
yeah, yeah. I'll give you the 2 others. These 2 people together. One of them since 2006 have had 20 convictions. The other person they were with since 2006, 50 convictions. Uh, you know, with serious crimes. You know, firearms, assault, robberies. Like our so our question is like, you know, admittedly, I don't have a good answer for how to deal with
Mm-hmm.
this, other than where are we putting our money?
Mm-hmm.
Like federally and provincially, where are we putting our money? Because there has to be a better way. Like, because we're spending every one of those convictions, every one of those breaches, all of that. That all costs us money. And in the case of these violent ones, it's costing people a lot more sometimes. So where are we putting that money? Is there better places to do? Do some people need to be in the system longer, hopefully getting different help? And also, are some of them like just not even identified through CLDS things that shouldn't even be out there at all? They need to be in a better space, and they're just going to be trapped in this system forever. Police know them, judges know them, local workers know who they are, but the general resident doesn't, and it's like so there's got to be a few different solutions here, and we probably have the money because we're spending it right now. We're spending it on in and out of court, following up on these same people again and again and again. Do we spend it differently for
Mm-hmm.
better purposes? That's the big question that we have out there.
no, I'm assuming if I transpose this conversation with the mayor of Moose Jaw and Swift Current in Saskatchewan, or Red Deer in Grand Prairie in Alberta, or Kamloops and Golden in BC, we'd be having the exact same conversation.
Yeah.
But the
I
question I'm
do
going
want
to
to throw
ask,
out Golden in BC. They are one of the best little bookstores there.
the former mayor will be very happy probably that you
Yeah,
just mentioned that.
Bacchus Books, it's called, and it's a really, really great little bookstore. The other places all have good bookstores too, but I really enjoy that.
But the thing that your communities, and they're all uniquely, they're their own unique communities, have are the shortcomings that have affected your communities because of this bail system challenges that are occurring right now. To Mayor Knox and then to Mayor Fawcett, how has the bail system shortcomings affected local businesses and the overall community's well-being as a whole? Because I can imagine, as Mayor Fawcett just listed, his just in January, that's January 2025 we're talking about. We're not even talking about 2024. But these repeat offenders, these violent offenders are out on the streets, and they could cause harm. They could kill somebody, and this could potentially lead to a catastrophic event, which it did in January. How has the shortcomings affected your communities, Mayor Knox?
I think us, like many communities, the feeling of safety in our communities has diminished quite a bit. Um, I think, affecting our municipality in what we're spending our resources on. I think I've really thought a lot since this incident, not only about the victims of it, but really our first responders, like our police and our RCMP. It's like, why do we keep putting them on a hamster wheel? I don't think people get into that profession to think that they're going to just be constantly dealing with repeat offenders and not, to them, feeling like they're not making a difference, because that's what they go into law enforcement, is to make a difference in community. But how is that for their mental health? How is that for their well-being? A couple of weeks ago, we had an incident where we had a repeat offender, completely well known to the police over and over again. And in a pursuit, it was in an accident with one of our officers. And luckily the officer wasn't hurt, but the cruiser sure was, and it could have ended very differently too. But even just the community feedback I heard from that, from people seeing that picture of our RCMP in an accident with a prolific offender, it just raised all those emotions again of like, why is this continue to be happening? And I really think like Mayor Fawcett and I can have these conversations and talk about what's going on in our communities. And we know that we could be having them with any community in our country, and it's the same thing.
Mayor Fawcett, for yourself, how has the shortcomings of the bail system affected the well-being of your community?
Well, it's the like there's I want to stress that there's lots of positives all the time. I always stress this all the time. You know, like 345 days of the year, our local paper could put in no violent incident in the city downtown, no violent incident. But the people will get tired of reading that every day, and eventually it end up. So what does come up is the big ones. So we always do that, and then but all you need is one, and that trickles out all the way through. And we have exceptionally good community mobilization groups, like the things that we're trying to do as a municipality. That like the community mobilization work great together, all kinds of different groups working together to make sure individuals are always safe. And so the fact that we have something like that actually keeps our community much safer. But they don't always know somebody that's coming into the court from some other community, and they get released. We also with the jail here, we have an awful lot of number of people that are released from our jail to our safe and warm shelter, like to the homeless shelter. That's their address. That's a system that we're working on again with the other level of government on this. So we even have people released from the hospital, and their address, because they're not getting home, is the homeless shelter. And then that just does put you into a cycle. And then, of course, like a lot of communities over the last 25 years, we've put a lot of social services downtown. So it's become a concern. So people, if they're not down there a lot, they read the paper and they go with what they know. Even though, again, they could put in the paper most days, no problems. But the perception and the concern, it's there and it's real.
I should note that I have visited both your communities, and did not feel scared. I felt safe. I felt like I could just walk down the street and nothing bad would happen to me. I know that's not the case for everyone in your communities. That's not the case for anyone who visits any community. But for me, you guys are great communities, and you guys are great mayors.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that a little bit too though. Even of the number of the incidents that I'm saying here, a lot of these are people committing crimes on people they know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't affect you necessarily, Chris. It doesn't affect Sharilyn. It doesn't affect myself. It's this repeat cycle on all that. What is scarier is random.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we've had a few random. lately on these kind of incidents, a person that probably shouldn't have been on that street and commits a random crime. That is a bigger concern, and that is very scary. Yeah.
Mayor Knox, the bail is set at the federal level, and I'm going to preface this by saying this is a conversation that we're having on Wednesday, March 3rd, and this will be airing on Monday, March 10th. And on Monday, March 10th, we are going to have a new prime minister. We will not have the same prime minister that we have as of recording this. There is an ongoing trade war between the United States and Canada right now. There's challenges that are being the federal government is focused on that is not including bail reform.
Mhm.
What's your long-term prognosis to get this done in 2025? Because if we are still having this conversation 2 months, 5 months in March of 2026, there could be a lot more stories that we'd be having this conversation about. What's your prognosis that this could be fixed this year or next year or the year after?
Well, I know from my lens, and one thing that I've really learned in my last 6 years, and especially on this issue, and maybe Jeff can agree with me, is when I first started talking about issues with our judicial system and bail reform, all of these things, our prolific offenders, is I heard a lot of blame game of, oh, that's this level's responsibility or this level's responsibility. Well, I don't take that as an answer anymore because all of the parts have to be moving together for it to be effective. And so we're in a position right now where collaboration is something that we talk about on a daily basis in our municipal, provincial, federal levels. And so we're going to keep pushing that forward. I'm a multitasker. So if the only thing that the federal government can work on is tariffs, then they're not in the right job. This should be something that's a priority for them too. We want us to be economically sound. We want us to be a safe country. And this is piece in part to that. So if we're going to move Canada forward, we have to keep bail reform at the front and center on what we need to look at.
Mayor Boston, do you have anything to add about that?
I'm completely with Sharilyn on that. It is a little bit of blame game all the time, but I think that what we're doing here, and again, AMM in Manitoba, really getting on board. I think the reach out to SUMA would be good, and then across the prairies, and then eventually it's FCM. So we're getting the same message across to everybody. And you know what? As much as people don't think, like governments are capable of walking and chewing gum. So we can
Yeah,
we can do
that's right.
more than one thing at a time. So we will continue to work on that. And I think the other thing that people don't always realize is politicians do want to do what the public is looking for, and the public wants something that makes them feel a little bit safer. This is a loose end that has to be tied up somewhere, and we would work with the other levels of government if needed to be to try to come up with the solutions. But it really is, where are they going to put their money? Is it just on this constant work that we're doing right now that just keeps police busy, keeps the courts busy, keeps everything busy, or is it in more places to put people that don't have to just be jail, but some place that can keep those people safe and other people safe?
Have either of you had any conversation with anyone in the federal government around this issue, or someone from the opposition benches? Because you're right, the federal government should be able to walk and chew gum at the exact same time. And if they can't, then maybe they should just walk and then chew and then walk, then chew and then pause. But if things are going to happen, you're going to have to start the conversations. Has the conversation started with the federal government besides having that letter sent out to the Minister of Justice federally, Mayor Knox?
The only federal conversations I've had is with our local MP here, and he's opposition right now. So that's Brandon Leslie. And he himself there's a couple of petitions going on. Our MLA, who's opposition right now, has a petition going for bail reform, as well as our MP has another federal level petition happening on it. So locally, we have support. But I have not received a response back from the Minister of Justice.
Mayor Fawcett, have you had any conversations with your local MP or someone
Oh,
within?
yeah. So local MP and like to his credit, Minister of Justice Matt Wiebe has had a very open door. Him and I have sat down in my own office here. He's got an ear, and I said day one, and we strangely enough had a meeting shortly after Sharilyn had got her letters out and that, and it was like, I'm 100% behind her on this, and so that door's been open. And then in the case of Manitoba, the opposition party MLA, who is opposition critic, is our former chief of police, who for years him and I were working on trying to do bail reform. So he's well versed, and as much as people don't like hearing it, the opposition and government are capable of working together, just not publicly sometimes, but they're more than capable of working together, and they do.
There's one subsection of the population that we have not talked about, and I want to just put them in here for a few minutes, and that is the citizen. The citizens of your communities.
Mm-hmm.
While you guys are both mayors, you have the ear, you probably have cell phone numbers of the premier, cabinet ministers, of opposition members. What can citizens do to support this push for bail reform and make their voices heard and amplify the voices that you have to address this issue? Mayor Knox?
I think those petitions going around, they give regular citizens a voice, which is great. I've put a call out there that if anybody ever wants to share their story with me, that I can use, and I've received emails of personal stories. I've had phone calls of people telling me their stories of how some of this has affected them and their families. The more they want to share that and tell their stories, the more it gives strength to our call for action.
Mayor Fawcett?
Yeah, and so the same kind of thing. There's always the petitions, there's always the letter writing, but it is mostly just us communicating with the public, and then our role is to champion that forward. As a representative of the public, that's been the biggest piece. Is they want to know that we are trying to do something. It's been very clear this is a concern, this is an issue, and they want to know, are we trying to do something on something that is of concern to them? And that's part of our job, to represent our citizens. So we are trying to do that the best we can.
We're closing in on 45 minutes here, and I have two last questions. And the second last question is for both of you, if you don't mind. We'll start with Mayor Fawcett. What's the one thing you want people to know about bail reform and why the municipalities are taking it so seriously that we have not touched on in this conversation so far?
Well, I guess the fact that we don't have a whole lot of say in how bail reform works. It's sort of outside of our jurisdiction, but the reality and what happens is inside the municipality. So it happens to sort of, our residents in our community, and we get asked, what are you guys going to do about it? And that's why we're working with our other levels of government, because it does affect the stores in a municipal community, the sense of safety in a municipal community, and all the residents. So we have to represent those people. And again, as I said, we have our community mobilization, we have our cadets program, like we do all kinds of things, and it is costing us as well to try to make sure everybody's feeling as safe as possible. So we just need to work, as Sharilyn was saying, with the other levels of government, all on the same page to try to move forward.
Mayor Knox, for yourself, what haven't we talked about that you want to make sure people understand about this issue?
Yeah, I think I want to reiterate what Jeff said earlier too, was the fact that I don't have the full answers. I don't have the complete solution, because if there's nothing that I haven't learned in the last few years dealing with this is bail and our judicial system is complicated. Right. So it's not an easy fix, where we often live in a world where we can build a building, build a bridge, or create a program. There's so much intricacies to it that we don't even understand. So our role at our municipal level is to push it forward for change, right? We're not the ones telling them what to do. We're just telling them that they need to come up with a solution. And so I think that's important for people to know that's what we're using our voice for.
Mayor Knox, what does success look like in this call for action? If we were to have this conversation in a year and you said, Chris, this was the successful turning point to address this issue, what would that be? Would it just be a conversation with the Minister of Justice? Would it be actual true bail reform, or would there be a first step that needs to be taken?
I think it's definitely more conversation about what they're talking about with bail reform, right? And then really looking at some of our smaller municipalities and how it's really affecting us. And I think Mayor Fawcett said is like really looking at where we're spending our money and where they're spending their money and where that money needs to be spent. But I'll start with a call with the federal justice minister. That would be a very good start. Even though he's on the way out, we'll make sure his file's full for the next. He's retiring, so I'm not talking about the election. He's retiring. I'll make that clear. Yeah.
Or he could be a completely different minister by the time this airs, because there's going to be a potential new cabinet that's going to be put into place here on Monday. So who knows?
That's right. Yeah.
Mayor Fawcett, what changes would make you feel like progress has been made on this file?
There'd be the changes that like police and politicians would observe, and that nobody else would ever notice.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it would be changes where we would look through a year in review and say, wow, the 50 conviction people, we didn't see much of that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, like the data. We look at the data and say, you know what, there's less repeat offenders on the streets. You know, and if it was their second or something like that. And then the message is sent, okay, the person can't be, we need to do a better job of helping this person before they get back out on the street.
Yeah.
That, you know, so we could see that. General public might not notice that. But we'd have to have something a little bit measurable. What we want is, and then have our public not talking about it.
That's right. A perfect example is we've implemented our CSOs in Portage la Prairie. My last council meeting, it showed our property theft stats gone down. That's what we want to see at our meetings. Yeah. Exactly. Those type of numbers.
Yeah.
Before I wrap up and do my last parting ways, and thank you both, I want to leave with a last question to Mayor Knox. Kellie Verwey was an integral part of your community. Her legacy is not just a light, but a beacon for a call for action. You know the family, you knew Kellie personally. How do we honor Kellie in the appropriate way to ensure that her passing wasn't in vain?
We keep pushing this forward any way we can. We keep pushing it forward so that the loss of her wasn't in vain. And we keep saying Kellie's name, and we keep people reminding her of her story. And someday we hope that we can say, with Kellie's loss, we saw change in our country so that families don't have to go through what they've gone through. This week we have International Women's Day, and we're going to celebrate and honor Kellie tomorrow night at our event, and just keep remembering who she was and remembering that this tragic loss wasn't in vain.
Mayor Knox, Mayor Fawcett, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk about this. This is an important issue. As I told you off the record, off before the interview started, I was just recently up in Yellowknife, and this topic and what happened in Portage la Prairie was prominent, and it was talked about from communities from the northern tip of the territories to Yellowknife. So I truly appreciate you taking time to do this. I hope action is given and the federal government listens to your calls, because I think it's an important step we need to take for the safety of not just the people of Portage la Prairie, the people of Brandon, but the people of Canada. So thank you so much for both of you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chris. Keep up what you do.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. We hope you've enjoyed some of today's conversation and gained valuable insights into this important issue that municipalities are dealing with in Manitoba. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on social media at Cross Border Network. For even more content and learn more about the stories and people we feature on this show and all of our other shows, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you right here on Municipal Affairs. Till then.